Good morning, everyone. This is Wednesday, January 27th, 2021, a special Board of Education meeting for the East Aurora Union Free School District. Please be advised that as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, in accordance with Executive Order 202.1, members of the public are not able to attend today's session in person. Members of the Board of Education and East Aurora administrators are attending the meeting remotely via Google Meet. It can be viewed live streamed today on our website or via the link on our main district webpage. And the meeting will be recorded and transcribed for at a later date and posted there as well. I'm going to call the meeting to order and ask you all to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. May I have a meeting to enter executive session to discuss the matter, the employment history of one particular employee.
So moved.
Moved by Kim Daniel, second.
Second.
Was it Terry? Was that you?
Yeah, me.
Seconded by Terry O'Leiler. Discussion. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Carried. I'd ask you to follow the link on your email for the second link and head to executive session. And then, Mark, are you able to text Brian or just meet us there? Good morning, everyone. Again, this is Wednesday, January 27th, 2021, for a special Board of Education meeting of the East Aurora Union Free School District. I remind everyone that as a result of the pandemic and in accordance with Executive Order 202.1, where the public is not able to attend this meeting in person, and members of the Board of Education are attending the meeting remotely via Google Meet. You can find it on our live stream on our district webpage, on the link on our webpage, and the meeting will be recorded and transcribed at a later date. We are returning from executive session where we discussed the employment history of one particular employee. Mr. Russ, I understand we have an agenda change, and so I just...
Yep, I just wanted to add on discussion around winter and spring sports. So we can do that after the appointment.
Yep. So following items requiring board action, we're going to do items for board discussion and add winter sports. Any objection? All right, then We are moving on then to item A. Item A, the superintendent recommends the Board of Education appoint Cindy Marinaccio to a 1.0 FTE probationary position with the title of Director of Pupil Services, Special Education, within the tenure area of Director of Pupil Services, effective February 24th, 2021. All is detailed in your agenda and in the attachments. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Judy, second.
Second.
Seconded by Dan Brunson. Discussion? I think this makes it official, Cindy, after we vote. So all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Carried 7-0. Congratulations. Welcome back to East Aurora and welcome in your new role.
Thank you.
Congratulations, Cindy. Welcome.
Thank you very much. And it's so nice to see Jess and Bill and Travis. Thank you for joining.
All right. And then item B, items for board discussion. Item B, winter sports.
Yes, so we were notified, a couple days ago. Well, it's been going on for more than a few days, and we weren't really sure how it was going to work out. But now we've gotten some information yesterday afternoon about what the section has decided to do in terms of moving forward with some of the sports that were postponed. And I thought we could talk about the two sports we're looking at right now, because indoor track was actually canceled because they could not find a venue to run the meets and do it in a safe way. So that was taken off earlier this year. And then it still left for us wrestling, basketball, and cheerleading. And also then in the spring, they're thinking about bringing football back, which starts March 28th. And we have to make some decisions about football, though, within the next couple of days, if we're going to participate or not. So I'll probably just add that to our conversation at this time as well. So they're taking the winter and some of the fall sports that weren't allowed to run and the spring sports and putting them in between February 1st and June 30th. And so, as you can imagine, it's a little crazy, and it's just a lot to figure out, and we're in a very tight time frame. But I thought, which I would be normally communicating with the board kind of via email and maybe calling a special board meeting. Yes, we're very fortunate that we just happen to have one scheduled today, so that we can speak about what it looks like and any concerns that you may have around that. So what I thought we could do is start off with wrestling and basketball, which are the two sports that they're talking about. And then cheerleading, Chris, can you just comment on that? Is that also happening at this time?
So cheerleading is not happening. Essentially what's happened is they've removed the winter cheer season, and they're only going to maintain that fall 2 cheer season during football. So cheer during basketball is kind of non-existent this year, and there will only be cheer during football.
Thank you. Okay, so yeah, so that's something we can talk about later on as well. And we thought about it a little bit because there are ways that you could probably cheer and stay socially distant. So that's possibility for sure during football season if we choose to participate. But right now the most immediate needs are basketball, wrestling, and football, because football we have to make some decisions on if we're going to participate or not. I know this isn't ideal, and it's a very short time frame. Like I said, it just happened couple of days, and we just received the information yesterday afternoon. Chris, Bill, and I spoke last night about it, and here we are this morning. So, Chris and Bill, I'll kind of turn it over to you, and if you can explain what we were thinking about, how would it be possible for basketball and wrestling to move forward or not? Please please feel free to express yourselves.
Bill, do you want me to? Bill, you're muted. I'm going to let you go ahead first.
Chris, do you want to just quickly review, just so everybody knows that timeline that Brian was alluding to, which sports would be playing at what times, and then although minimal guidance that we've received, you want to review what that minimal guidance is as well, just so we have a foundation for our conversation.
Yes. So the winter season is slated to start February 1st and end March 27th. The fall 2 season is scheduled to start March 22nd and end May 15th. And the spring season is scheduled to start May 10th and end June 30th. So essentially what Section 6 has done is taken those last 21 weeks of school and split them up evenly, essentially 7, 7, and 7, 7 weeks, 7 weeks, 7 weeks, with a one week potential overlap for playoffs. And that's something you normally see, you know, when you move from fall to winter, there's a little bit of overlap and so on and so forth. So the immediate sports in question are wrestling and basketball. They're supposed to start on Monday. And I guess the dilemma is the guidance that is out for us to play by is similar to it's actually the exact guidance that we had in the fall regarding mask wearing. The guidance essentially states you need to wear a mask, but if the activity causes you to not be able to wear a mask, you can play without a mask. This is the cause for concern, I would say, or this is the one question mark area with it that we need to kind of decide what we're going to do.
Chris, do you want to?
Can I just jump in there? And I'll say this, our thoughts on this were, we were going to establish a policy that our players would wear masks during the game, and we would only play those teams that agreed to also wear masks during the game. That way we could.
Brian?
What's that?
Was that for both wrestling and basketball?
Well, yeah, this is just for basketball, yeah, because wrestling, it's going to be really difficult to wear a mask because just the nature of the sport, right? You're running around and rolling around, and it's going to pull your mask off. Could even, potentially, choke. Who knows what could happen with the mask when you're wearing it wrestling. So we don't see that as possible, and so I guess we have some greater concerns about how that happens. And now I'll just say this: that the section worked with the 5 departments of health that represent each area of the section. So there's 5 different, there's Erie, Genesee, Chautauqua, Cattaraugus, and I don't know, Allegheny, whoever else there was. There's 5 departments of health that actually sat down to put their seal of approval on this. And so, we don't have all the details of how they came to that decision, but we were struggling with the wrestling piece. We were really struggling, knowing that they would just be allowed to wrestle without anything on at all, because it's just not going to work. And so the basketball piece, I think if we wear a mask and the other team wears mask, and we can see from like contact sports, like say for instance soccer in the fall, while they're in they're open air, of course. Some people wore masks, some did not. There's a lot of contact in soccer, and there was no spread during those seasons that we're aware of. There was no spread, not only in our school but across our section, I believe. And I could be mistaken there, but I didn't hear any reports of any kind of spread, not only in soccer but any of the sports that took place during the fall. So the mask piece does really seem to be quite effective. I'm sure because you're outdoors, that helps. These are indoor sports, and that's one of the issues that we have, like even with swimming. Now, swimming's been allowed to move forward under different conditions, but nonetheless, they are indeed swimming, and they've started their season this past week, right, Chris?
Yes.
Yeah.
They started last night, was their first meeting.
Yeah. So it's and so what it is these seasons, like Chris was saying, are 7 weeks long. They have a very short practice component. So there's about like 5 days. Is it 6 days?
6 days.
6 practices, and then they go right into playing games, which isn't typical. So therefore, they're able to kind of maximize the number of competitions that they can have during the season. I think, and Bill and Chris speak up about basketball. We were comfortable suggesting that to the board, and we see that could be a way to really protect our students, but also allow them to play. One thing we have done is we have followed the guidance of the Department of Health through this process, and it has worked quite well for us. We've had some additional incidents in January, far more cases than we've had in the previous 4 or 5 months of school. But what we found is that, first of all, like at Parkdale, where we had the most cases, we were still at only 1.5%. The Department of Health doesn't become concerned because they are monitoring our dashboard on a daily basis. When we hit 3%, then they intervene with the school district, and then they evaluate those cases to see where the cases are coming from or if there's any spread within the actual school itself. For us, I'm happy to say that there was no school spread. All those 11 cases came from outside of the school district. And so Dr. Nicholas from the Department of Health told us that even if we hit 3%, they would not be concerned because that 3% was coming from outside of the district. And so for us, she has no concerns right now about the increase in the number of cases within the district because of the nature of where those cases are coming from. And so we have followed along with the Department of Health, and their guidance has really helped us to forge our plan and to keep our kids safe. Like I said, in the fall, when we started fall sports, I was very, I had some angst about it because we were just trying to get the educational program up and running. Then we were forced to address athletics, which, you know how much I support athletics. I think it's incredibly valuable for our students for a variety of reasons. But I was a bit skeptical because we didn't have time to think about it. But we went forward and we had a lot of success. And I'll say this, our students, their performance was very successful, probably one of the most successful seasons we've had in a long time. So it was a very good experience for them. Everybody was safe, and there was no spread of the virus through those activities. So the 5 DOHs getting together, there's a lot of very intelligent and well-informed people. They understand the virus and how it is spread. And so they gave us their stamp of approval to move forward with these sports. One thing that we thought about in wrestling was that typically in a match, you're one-on-one. So you would be spending, and Chris, do you know the length of the match? Were you able to find that information?
I was not able to find, but I believe it's 3-minute periods.
Yeah. So if that's the case, right now the current guidelines from the DOH, they backed off because they realized there's very, very limited spread, if any at all, within school districts, that you have to be within close contact, less than 6 feet of a person for 10 minutes or more. So if it's 10 minutes or less, then they consider that a safe circumstance and that the virus will not spread. If it's 10 minutes or more, then that's where their concern comes in, and that's where contact tracing takes place. So we don't have very many circumstances like that because of our social distancing. But in this case, obviously they would not be socially distant because wrestlers are in direct contact with one another. Their match is 9 minutes total. So maybe that's what they're thinking, because it's less than 10 minutes, that the possibility of the spread of the virus is very minimal. So I don't know that because we weren't given that information. I'm just trying to kind of put some pieces together as to why they would think that would be okay, because there's such direct contact, and without a mask, you know, the breathing and the particles that are spread, it's kind of right there, right? It just in some ways doesn't seem to make sense, right? I don't know.
Brian, can I add something?
Sure, certainly.
The New York State Department of Health is probably, if not the last, we're one of the last to allow any high risk sports. So I'm just kind of anticipating that they've watched what's gone on across the country, and they've now made the decision to say, okay, it's time to do this. Not only do our kids need it, but we've seen that the spread. I haven't seen research on this, but I'm only guessing that they've seen that that this is okay to do. So they're now opening it up. That's my guess. Our Department of Health has probably been the most cautious, or one of the most cautious in the country. And now they're giving this opportunity back to kids. So I just wanted to throw that out there, that we're probably one of the last to be given the opportunity to start both of these activities.
And Brian,
You had a question, I think.
Yep. Good But Bill, before you go ahead, Bill, do you want to add something to that?
Just wanted to add, because it might affect comments. The timeliness of this is because the Department of Health has met with the section executive committee yesterday, and now the athletic directors are meeting today. So we want to equip Chris with our thoughts as he goes into that meeting. Two additional things that didn't come up, I don't believe came up, was if moving forward there would be no fans at these events. And then the other piece is the opposing teams being held to COVID screening and temperature checks as well. So those are just some additional things to consider as we have this conversation.
Dan, I know you had a question. Your hand's been up.
Yes, please.
Sure.
Well, first of all, I support your notion that we should play basketball only if the opposing team also agrees to wear masks. I noticed some of the contests that occurred earlier in the year, that was not the case. You know, it was disturbing to me to see. I'm relieved to hear that it did not result in the transmission of disease, but I think it could have. And so I think your notion that we will only play a team that also follows the same rule makes all the sense in the world. It's also fair. It's just not fair for one team to have no restriction in their breathing while the other team does. It adds an element of unfairness to the play. So I'm glad to hear that. The other thing I wondered about was testing. For you know, I appreciate that Bill just said that there's screening that will occur for both teams. And that makes a whole lot of sense, to screen both teams prior to the contest. But I'm wondering, with wrestling in particular, whether it might not be smart to do one of these 15-minute tests for each pair of wrestlers. Then at least you have an objective measure that neither of these two people are apparently infected, and they can go ahead and do their thing rather than just take a chance that 9 minutes is going to work. My guess is that 10-minute thing was based on the notion of casual contact, the idea that maybe you were sitting at the same dining table or something like that, for 10 minutes. But if you put two people's faces close together and one of them sneezes or coughs, the other person is going to take it all right in. And so I would suggest, you know, I'll support whatever it is you folks recommend, but I suggest that we consider this rapid testing for the wrestlers.
Judy?
I 100% agree with you, Dan. I think you have to have something like that. It can't just be a temperature check or a sign on a paper, oh yeah, I'm fine. No, it's going to have to be something pretty serious, because those guys are in that close, I don't want to say combat, but they're really aggressive at that point, and they are breathing heavy, and they are giving off spittle and things like that. And we have to be careful that we're protecting our kids as well as the other team.
Kim?
On a technical end, can I just weigh in on that? We would have to secure those tests outside of the allotment that we have, the ones that the state has given us so far. I'm not weighing in on it, just procedural. Can only be used for that random screening. So we would have to find other tests, but that's not a deal breaker. Just letting you. We can't say, well, we have them in the basement.
The county executive yesterday announced that they have more than enough testing materials in the county. They have a surplus of it, and that any agency who needed them could have them immediately. So I take him at his word.
Kim?
Just two comments. One, you know, I feel like the temperature check, I understand where everyone's coming from with that. But again, we all need to recognize there's a lot of false negatives, false positives. It's just a little picture in that point in time. That doesn't mean that the person isn't infected and it just hasn't shown up on that test. So it could give us some sense of security, but we need to recognize the limitations in those tests. Second, my concern is, as we've all talked about with this 10 minutes, this is putting a big burden, I feel, on the referees and the people that are in charge of this wrestling, because you go beyond that 9 minutes, now all of a sudden have you just exposed these kids? So how close? I have a lot of concerns about the wrestling component. And I would like to hear more information actually from the Department of Health as to how they reached this conclusion that it was safe to do the wrestling. I can understand with the basketball, because you can wear the mask, you can have the kids sit separate on the bench, you can, you have a large arena, you don't have spectators present. You could even open doors if you wanted to in our gym to make sure we have air circulating. Like, I can understand that. I'm really struggling. And I don't mean to put myself above the experts at the Department of Health, but in my mind, I really struggle with this decision to say that wrestling is okay.
Kim, the one thing
Before we respond to that, I just have one, which I think is sort of dovetails on Kim. So let me just, is the 9 minutes a set 9 minutes? Their clock doesn't stop, so that they're wrestling, something happens, the clock stops, it restarts again. Like the 9 minutes is the 9 minutes, right?
I searched last night, and I'm almost 100% positive it's 3-minute periods. Now, there are matches where someone gets pinned in the first period, and that's the end of the match.
No, I understand that. I just didn't know if the clocks, we play football, but it's,
They stop the clock. They ever stop the clock?
A 15-minute quarter lasts 45 minutes.
Right, and that's why I just want to make sure that the 3-minute periods, there's no.
I think it's similar. I think that 3 minutes can be interrupted. If Matt just joined, he would know the exact time for wrestling. I see Matt. Here he comes to save the day. Matt,
one of you
information that I missed.
Yeah, can you tell us what's the length of a wrestling match? Chris thought it was 3-minute periods. We're trying to understand how the DOH has given permission for wrestling to move forward with the fact that the two wrestlers are like on top of each other. They're really close, and they're sharing the air, and expelling a lot of stuff, and what I mean. It's just, so how long is the match? And we're thinking that maybe because we thought it was 3-minute periods, it's less than 10 minutes, which is the standard of close contact. I don't know, but we're just trying to figure it out because we're really struggling. We came up with a plan for basketball that the board in general seems to be okay with. I know there's going to be some questions about it, but for wrestling, we're all kind of struggling with how does that work? Can you explain it to us a little bit?
Sure. So wrestling is actually 3 2-minute periods.
Thank you.
The full duration of the match could last longer than 6 minutes because there's, out of bounds, they got to go back to the middle of the mat. It might take 10 seconds. But it could be over sooner if somebody gets pinned or technical fall. So it could be, I'd say half the matches might last the full 3 periods.
And that could be like 7 or 8 minutes long, or could it be 15 minutes long, Matt? I mean, it would never be that long.
Yeah, I mean, so yes, it could, but anytime a match would last that long would be because of injury time or blood time. So if there was a bloody nose, what happens at that point in the match is the wrestlers actually go back to their corners, or they go to their team benches, and they either get worked on by the trainer if they're the one that's bleeding, or if it's their opponent that has the blood time or the injury time, they're separated from their opponents at that point.
Tim, another concern that I threw out there was also and I've walked through a number of wrestling practices over my 20 years. I'm concerned about what a practice will look like within our own athletes. Practicing basketball is a lot different than practicing wrestling. You practice it by wrestling another individual. So there's that, not just something that we have to consider. It's not just when we're wrestling against another team, but it's when we're wrestling against one another. And again, you think about our school environment right now, we maintain social distance and are required to maintain social distance every day, all day long, during lunch, during music, during phys ed, during the classroom setting. So it's quite a leap to enhance the the chance of transmission between, not only between us and other schools, but between our own students.
So what's the recommendation?
That's why the superintendent is with us today.
Mary Beth, I have a question.
Terry.
One, how many students are we talking about that are involved in wrestling? And two, Brian, you had said that or someone had said that we're going to have the kids tested, temperature and rapid COVID test. So that is something that we would do every time we played, no matter whether it was here or away, or how does that work? Do we tell the other opponent schools that your children or your students are going to be rapid tested when they're here, and when we go to you, that also has to be done? I mean, how will that work?
Anyone?
Judy, I'm sorry, I got disconnected. Terry, can you just say that again? I apologize.
So the first one is, how many students are we talking about as far as wrestling goes? And secondly, when it comes to the COVID rapid test that we are proposing doing to these students, are we telling the schools that when they come to our school for a meet, or I think you call it a meet, that their students will be rapid tested here? What happens when we go to another school? Do we bring our own tests, or does that school test them? How is that going to work?
Yeah, Terry, our thought on it was that we would say, in like a condition for wrestling our team, you would have to agree to taking a rapid test. So if you say, if my team's not going to do that, then we're going to say we're not going to wrestle your team. That's basically it.
So whether we go to their
it's kind of like the mask thing for basketball. We're going to say, you know, our players are going to wear masks, and we expect the teams that come here to play us to wear masks. Or when we come to your school, we expect you to wear masks. You may not do that against other teams. That's your choice. But if you want to play our team, this is like the condition that we thought we would put upon them.
Okay.
Can I ask a question there? I'll bring this up at my meeting later today. And I'm sure that there will be other schools with very, very similar, if not the exact concerns. I don't know I would not know how the rapid testing would happen, because, for example, I'm not trained to give that test. We would need to have a person or people there to give those tests, to quote unquote read those tests. That's a whole nother element. I don't know if the league is prepared for that, and maybe they are. Maybe I'm going to go into this meeting and they're going to say, hey, as a league, this is what we want to do. I don't know that, but I just wanted to throw that out there. I think that's a big hurdle, a really big hurdle.
Kim?
I hear all of this, but I didn't hear anyone addressing what Bill has brought up about practice, because wouldn't the same, obviously, should we rapid test our own students then if we're going to be having a practice with these kids? Because how is it different to go to a meet than it is to have our own students? I'm just trying to understand this in my mind, the distinction. So, I guess the practice and who would be overseeing, obviously we have the coach, but to make sure that all of these restrictions are in place in terms of the amount of time the students can be, in close contact with one another. How are we following the social distancing? Because the practice actually is a big concern also.
Maybe what we could do is maybe we can contact Dr. Nicholas, who's been our representative from the Department of Health, and just ask her how they came to this determination, because it just doesn't really feel right. It's like, and again, we've been very successful following their direction, and so I personally have found a lot of reassurance in that process. It's, this has been an overwhelming circumstance. We're going back now almost a year that we've been dealing with this. And one thing I found, especially as we started to return in the fall, is that she was very clear and definitive in her, not her personally, but in the Department of Health's position. And so she has shared those things with us, and it's very, I'll be honest, straightforward and logical. It's very easy to work with her because she's very direct. She based her decisions on data, and those decisions that they have made have worked. So I feel confident in that. So this one is kind of like flying in the face of everything that we've been talking about so far. And even like we struggle right now with pulling together activities for our students because we're still limited by the orange zone. So they're saying in one breath we can allow these athletic activities to take place, but our school activities are still restricted. And so because they're so restricted, we can't. We're trying to do the musical. We're trying to do different activities like Winterfest, and to engage kids in a different way, because we know it's really important and it's something that we need. But every time that the principals want to step forward, they're restricted by that orange zone category. So it's kind of in conflict. It doesn't really make a lot of sense to us. And I'll be honest, it's frustrating because, like I said, athletics is incredibly important. And that's why we put that conditioning piece in place. And that's been going really well. The coaches have been following the rules, keeping the kids apart, but those kids are actively engaged in just, opportunities to train, to build their bodies, to clear their minds. And those conditioning activities are wonderful, and it's serving a really important purpose. But they're doing it with under strict guidelines, and our coaches are really following through. So I'm very proud of their work, because it's not easy. But they're doing it for their kids, and so that's been really productive. But we are also missing out on the rest of the population that doesn't participate in athletics. And we have all these great ideas that we want to do to engage our kids, but we're limited because we're under this orange zone designation, which is very, very restrictive. And so it doesn't make sense.
Dan, you had a quick.
Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Just a quick comment. I heard you say a few minutes ago that I heard Chris say that and Bill, that the physical education program has been successfully operating with appropriate social distancing and appropriate activities that do not transmit disease. I'm just wondering why we would not follow the same procedures and regulations with regard to the athletic program. What makes athletics different from physical education that would cause us to take chances in athletics that we wouldn't take in our normal physical education program?
What I've said, Dan, to Brian, and I've probably said it too much to him over the last 48 hours, is if we have found that it is safe to increase the interaction, with the example of competitive basketball or possibly even wrestling, that I'd like to see the restrictions that we have in our day-to-day schooling change as well. If it's safe to do it on an athletic field, then you got to give me a little flexibility within the school day too, because our kids are suffering, and the longer this goes on, it gets worse and worse. So that's a question that I've asked Brian that we need to take to the Department of Health and make sure that the changes in athletics match changes within the school day as well.
Well, that's a good point, Bill. It seems to me that if they're unwilling to do that, then what they're saying is that somehow or another athletics is more important than the other activities sufficiently to take further risks with children than you would with music, for instance, or drama, or any other activity that goes on in the schools. And I don't buy that. We treat all of our people the same. We treat all of our aspects of the curriculum the same. And they're all important. They're all equally important. And all the children should be placed in whatever situation is appropriate for them, and not because some activity is conceived by some adults outside of our school district as being worth taking risks. I don't buy that.
Jessica had to leave the meeting, but she did. I did offer to ask a question if she had one, and she said, what would our plan be on basketball if we don't see masks in use as agreed upon? Who's going to police that, and how would that get policed? Like, what's your expectation of how that would be handled?
Mary Beth, just off the top of my head, I think it would just be the coach. If they show up for a game and the other coach would know ahead of time that this is the criteria, for us to play.
I guess I'm not so sure you would know ahead of time, right? If a game is going on and those athletes are taking their masks off, what's going to happen then?
And Mary
I guess
Beth, sorry, Brian.
Nope.
What we did with the conditioning, at the start of the conditioning here, Travis and I made a point, as well as Chris, to be engaged in that from the beginning, to make sure that our own athletes and our own coaches know the expectation. And you could trust that Travis and I will be there to make sure that the opposing teams meet that expectation, as well as our athletes. That's very important to us.
Okay. And then it occurs to me that they've shortened practice for all 3 seasons to 1 week. Do we know whether any consideration was given to the risk the athletes face going into competition with that short of a window? I know we have this conditioning program in place and our athletes are doing that, but I'm not even sure that all of our athletes are participating in that. And so I'm a little concerned about competition with just a short window of opportunity for them to get ready for competitive play.
That was one of the main considerations in starting the off-season conditioning. There are schools that have not started the off-season conditioning, so they will essentially get, for basketball and wrestling anyway, they'll get 6 days of practice potentially prior to a first game. That is a concern. For our kids, that's why we tried to put something in place starting January 4th, so that we had some conditioning in place in case this happened, so to speak. We plan to do the same for our fall 2 kids, who many of them are currently doing that now. And then for our spring kids as well, to the best of our ability, we'll make sure that prior to May 10th, they get a 4-week or a 5-week opportunity to just condition, do the same stuff. Even as the weather gets better there in April, you can get girls lacrosse and boys lacrosse on the turf. The runners can be outside at that time, and they can get probably a good month of conditioning prior to that actual start date.
And Mary Beth, about a year ago, the state did change the practice requirements prior to COVID. They did change it for the majority of the sports down to 6 practices.
Okay.
Football remains at 10. Football remains at 10 practices.
And just, I know we've got to also talk about football, because even though it's not until a later date, we need to make a decision if we're going to participate now so that they can put the schedules together. And the one thing that we did talk about is that we see, the collegiate and professional football has been quite successful. Again, they've had issues with the virus, but that spread is coming from outside of the teams and the organization, as far as we understand, primarily. Would you say that's correct?
That's what I've seen.
Yes.
Yeah, there's been transmission, I think, at the college level within teams. At the professional level, far less within teams. It's been influenced by outsiders. But a part of that is just the mechanisms in place at the professional level versus the collegiate level, but no evidence of transfer between teams at the college or professional level in football.
So are we having them wear masks for football as well? Will that be also a requirement?
The guidance from the state I'll pretty much guarantee will read the exact same way it read for soccer and for outdoor activities, which is basically as tolerated. I don't know if there will be specific guidance regarding masks for football due to the helmet and the wearing of the helmet and potential for maybe the mask being grabbed accidentally in a tackle. I have not heard that information has not come out. I do know that there's a visor that has been made that's almost like a complete, I'll call it a COVID visor, that can be purchased. If that's something that may not be a mandatory thing for all schools, but if we wanted to consider it, I could definitely find that and get all of the information on it. And if we wanted to do that for our athletes, but I don't know, I have not heard an answer regarding masks and football. I'm just gonna go based on the guidance we've always had from outdoor sports, which has been as tolerated, the same as it was for soccer, the same as it was for field hockey and it will be for lacrosse and other outdoor activities.
Yeah, Terry, I think again, the nature of football, wearing the mask could, I think be problematic. Just as Chris is saying, grabbing, tackling, that type of stuff that's happening throughout the game. I think again, there's just some risk associated with that, and then just the probability of keeping masks on. Where basketball, it's a much more controlled environment, I guess. And it won't be perfect. Masks will come down. You know what I mean? They're going to come down, and they just will need to be reminded that they need to keep them up. It does happen, even like during some of the practices or something. Kids, sometimes if they're not properly fitted, they just drop below your nose. We've all worn a ton of different masks, and some fit better than others. So those kinds of things are going to happen. We know that. I just think, again, the nature of the contact of football makes that mask wearing a tough thing to kind of maintain.
No, I totally agree with you. I was just wondering what our stance on that was. So I'm assuming lacrosse will be the same thing. It's outside if they can tolerate it.
Right, similar to what soccer. I mean, I think soccer was a good example for us. There's a lot of contact in soccer, right? And I think the nature of it being outdoors makes a big difference in terms of that ventilation. I think Kim said it. The idea of opening the doors when it's in the gym, during the games, might be a good idea when it's not, sub-zero or when it's tolerable. But that may help too, just to ventilation. And I'll say this too, is that in the very beginning, when I was talking to Dr. Nicholas about spaces like the cafeteria and gym, she said they're treated completely differently than classrooms because of the square footage and the ventilation. So there's a much lower probability that the spread happens with those environments than they do in a smaller classroom. And again, it's just the containment. So, when you're in a large gym like ours, again, there is natural ventilation that's helping to minimize that spread or to reduce
something.
Yeah, Brian,
Sure.
thank you. This notion of wearing a mask as tolerated seems to be in direct conflict with what you said earlier, which was we wouldn't play a team that didn't agree to wear masks. So how does that fit? They agree to wear masks, but then when they show up, they say, well, we can't tolerate it.
Yeah, I think we're saying for activities that are happening inside, Dan, and like a sport like basketball where you can control mask wearing, we feel that that's possible. But like in a wrestling match, you just know it's not going to work. So to start off two wrestlers with a mask on, within the first few moves of that match, those masks are going to be torn down or ripped off. So the probability of wearing it is very low, regardless if we say to or not. And the same thing for football, same thing for soccer. And I think, again, it appears to be a significant difference to sports that can happen outdoors that can happen indoors.
Well,
and again, the size of the indoor space. Yeah, go ahead.
Let me just clarify that the state is saying wear masks is tolerated.
Yeah.
The state is saying that for they did it for the sports we held in the fall, the original fall one, and they're doing that moving forward for any of the sports, including basketball. East Aurora, your recommendation or your approach was going to be, if we're going to have basketball, East Aurora is going to require that everyone wear masks, regardless of who we play, right? So
whether they can tolerate it or not.
Whether they can tolerate it or not, they're going to wear their masks.
Right.
So I just kind of want to summarize kind of where we're at in terms of moving forward. Does anyone object to East Aurora, to the recommendation that we play basketball with everybody wearing masks? Nothing. And then I'm hearing a lot of concern about wrestling. Obviously, that's presents a different issue. Mr. Brunson had suggested rapid tests for wrestlers. I know the Department of Health has said, okay, it's okay to do this. I'm hearing a lot of concern from other board members. We kind of, I don't know what you're looking for, Brian, in terms of whether the board supports running individual sports, or do you want to, we've had testing, we've had, get back to us from the Department of Health on what possibly they have found that makes wrestling okay. I'm encouraged that it's not a full 10 minutes, but we obviously have concerns about practices because that makes them some big difference. I think if I had to poll the board, you're going to have a different answer on wrestling than you might for basketball or even football moving forward. So do you think you can get us some additional information? I know your window is small. You're supposed to notify the section by tomorrow morning?
Yeah.
Yes. I'm
Yes.
supposed
Yeah.
to notify regarding football. I'm supposed to notify the section by tomorrow.
Okay.
Regarding basketball and wrestling, I have a meeting with our league today. And now, in all honesty, I firmly expect to only play league games. Don't hold me to that, but with the time frame we're given and the number of league games we have, I firmly expect to just about only play league games. I know that there are going to be multiple other athletic directors in other school districts concerned about basketball and wrestling in regard to masks. So my goal is to go into this meeting today with the intent of it being that at least one school that says we are wearing masks when we play basketball and we expect our opponents to wear masks. That I don't know the ramifications that could have. That could be, okay, well, here's only these 6 schools or these 4 schools are mask opponent, mask self. And so you guys are going to have to play each other. It could end up being a dilemma. It could end up being a situation where we end up with 2 or 3 opponents on the season only. Or it could be a situation where most directors are on the same page saying, yeah, my superintendent also and my board of education also is saying masks. So we as a league may go with a mask mandate. I don't know how that ends up after today, but I will bring that information back to whoever I need to as soon as I have it.
So if the deadline for football is tomorrow, does anyone have any objection to the recommendation that we play football with masks with the state guidance of masks as tolerated?
Well, I like the idea of the face shield. I know that it may not work quite as well as a mask, but I think we should do everything possible to protect these young people. So I would say investigate what PPE is the best for a football player and move forward with football with the notion that we'll spend a few dollars to make them as safe as possible.
Daniel?
I was just going to say, in agreement with that for football, my only question is, do we have any concerns about it starting in March? And how do you play football in March? Or is that something we're not really talking about right now?
It's a concern, Yeah, it's definitely a concern because, we know how the weather can be, right? And so, I guess that would be something we would have to deal with as the season progresses. If we have bad days, maybe they come in the gym and they just do certain drills or activities that they can do indoors. I guess we would have to work on that over the next several weeks to figure out what that would look like.
I've seen lots of football games where it was snowing.
Yeah.
And Tim, to answer your question,
How do you clean up the field? How do you clean up the dirt?
Exactly. To answer your question further, I have reached out to numerous athletic directors who also have turf. There is only one school that I have found that has a turf maintenance apparatus for snow, and that's Depew. Nobody else does, and all the other athletic directors that I've spoken with have basically crossed their fingers and said, "Let's hope it doesn't snow." And a lot of people were especially concerned when football start date was March 1st. Now that it's March 22nd, it looks a little bit more sensible. But we almost have to cross our fingers and pray that it's not going to snow.
Well, it's kind of like rain days during baseball season, right?
Exactly.
They get rained out all the time, and then we reschedule the games as best we can. So it's just, I guess we're just going to have to.
Aren't we all doing that by March anyway, even when there's not a finish?
Yes, right. Yeah. So it's just so unusual. So Terry, go ahead.
So Chris, when you go to your meeting today, where do we leave off with the testing? Because that's something that Dan suggested that we do as a district.
Yep. So Depending on what we decide right now regarding wrestling, I will definitely bring that up, and I'm sure I won't be the only one. And I will say that, you know, if East Aurora is going to wrestle, then we want to implement some type of testing at whether we're home or away. That's a really tough one, because other schools are going to say, well, you're not going to make us test in our own facility.
You know, and we according to what Mark said, we may not be prepared to do this. I raised the thought. It was just off the top of my head. Well, what about testing? So I don't think East Aurora intends to test, because that was just one board member presenting an idea. And from what I've heard from Mark and from others here, it may not be a practical idea that can be implemented.
Well, let me ask you this, Brian. Are you recommending that wrestling go forward if we weren't capable of doing rapid tests?
Well, I think for me personally, I need to hear it from Dr. Nicholas directly, because like I said, you know, we've been working with her particularly. She's our representative. You know, she gave her cell phone. You know, I've talked to her on the weekends, and you know, and Matt speaks to her, Liebrock speaks to her frequently about the cases that we have. And she's been very accessible and very easy to work with and very clear. And what I like is that her decisions are based on data, you know, so there's no emotion that's involved. It's just the science. And so what I would want to do is sit down and talk with her and ask her how they work this one out, because I'm just struggling with it. You know, I can understand the basketball thing, and we've seen basketball work, like we said, at the collegiate and the professional level. So, you know, so it's possible. We saw sports work in the fall very well with contact, but this one is so close. And like you said, the actual match is different than the practices. So that's another element we need to talk about. So if she assures me, I would bring that back to the board and say,
well, my suggestion would be this, is rather, would everybody feel comfortable if Brian has heard all of our concerns this morning about wrestling. He's heard from the board. I don't know that ordinarily he needs board action in order for wrestling to continue, but my suggestion would be that Brian take the concerns that have been raised this morning, speaks with the woman from the Department of Health, and if Brian is assured that it can happen in a safe manner, and between him and his administrative team and Coach K, they determine it can be done with the concerns that we've raised addressed, then would anybody object to having him proceed, or would you prefer another meeting?
No, I'm good with leaving the decision in Brian's hands.
I'm fine with that.
So am I.
Can I ask it? Sorry.
Kim, are you?
Yeah, I mean, I just had two follow-ups on this. Did we get a number of students that participate in wrestling? Maybe I missed that.
No, we did not.
In general, you usually have about 16 to 18 at the high school, and probably 16 to 18 middle school wrestlers as well.
And do we combine that with Holland? Is that one of our combinations?
We do.
We also have that. We also have another school district involved in this too. It's not just our student. I mean, they're part of our students as part of wrestling, but it's a different district in terms of its Holland, correct?
Correct.
And then, you know, again, Brian, which we've already emphasized, not only the issue of the games being, 6 minutes long, but the practice. You know, I'm really struggling with understanding how you practice for wrestling and keep it within the social distance if you're comfortable, then, we'll go with, I would be comfortable with the superintendent's recommendation, having heard all of our concerns.
John Seghetti, do you have anything? Okay, Brian, I think just in terms of what your takeaway is, that it's more, unless you can be assured that it can operate safely, I think the board would support whatever your decision is. If you decide not to run wrestling because it is not safe, I think you have the full backing of the Board of Education for that decision. If you decide after speaking with the health, woman from the health department, that due consideration was given to the concerns that have been raised here, and you decide, yes, it can go forward, then I think you have the support for the board for that decision as well. So I think we leave it back to you with that.
So, thank you. I appreciate that. And like I said, I think we're all on the same side here. We want to offer these opportunities for our students. We know how important it is, and especially right now, they need these types of activities. But at the same time, we have to assure that they are as safe as they possibly can be. Are they foolproof? Of course not. We know that, but we just want to make sure that the risk is minimum.
And then I think in your conversations with this woman from the Department of Health, I hope that you raise what Mr. Roberts and other board members have addressed this morning too, which is, you're really creating some great disparities in terms of the outlets that students have in the midst of this pandemic. And when you're saying things like musical performances or the arts, or, all the other activities that students participate in that give them some outlet beyond their remote learning, their hybrid learning. And if they're treating athletics differently than they are these other avenues, they are doing a tremendous disservice to the entire school community.
We just met last week.
And she ought to be able to have an answer as to why it's okay to do some of these things and not these others. And maybe you'll get some guidance that those things are about to change. And I hope that's true, if that's the case.
Yeah, I'm hopeful of that too, Mary Beth, that they'll actually change. They should have changed the status for school districts out of the orange zone weeks ago, because they know there's the evidence shows that it is not being transmitted within school districts in general. There's very, very few cases where that has happened. So they should have moved us out of that designation. But with that designation in place, it does kind of really tie your hands. And, we just met last week to talk about the musical, and we're going to move forward in some way, shape, or form. And thank goodness Chris is creative as he is. Mr. Cummins is, really dedicated to making it happen. And I said, we need to contact the DOH and get their guidelines. And that will be the guiding force behind developing the musical. So he's working on that right now. And there's other activities, all the bands, orchestras, choruses, all those things, their performances are very important, and we enjoy them, and they need to have those opportunities as well. And so we need to press them a little bit on how these decisions are being made.
Well, you have an opportunity, so press on.
Yes. And I will update the board as we receive additional information.
Could you let us know, Chris, what they say at their league meeting today about both of these two sports?
I will, and I will communicate that through Bill and Brian. Definitely, I'm actually very interested to know what goes on here too, because as eager as I am to have a season, I'm very cautious about it, and I want to make sure we have a safe season. That's my number one. I just have one last question.
It's a big leap. It's from no contact to this one happening, but all the stuff in the middle can't happen. It's a
right. I agree. I just wanted to add one thing. I'm sorry to prolong this. If there's a medical exemption from masking, like let's say we're playing against an opponent and the opponent has a player who has a medical exemption from a mask, a reason that it shouldn't be worn, are we okay with that? Or do I need to quote unquote eliminate that team from potential competition against us as well? I'm just thinking about all kind of potential outcomes here.
Here's a good question for Dr. Nicholas too.
Okay.
Mary Beth, I have to step away for a minute. I'll be back. But if you can bring this to a conclusion, don't hesitate to adjourn in my absence. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
You bet.
I think Chris, that can be left to the guidance the superintendent gives with respect to
appreciate it. Thank you.
I would anticipate that those exemptions might be tolerated, but I would be suspicious when an entire team had medical exemptions.
I was just going to say that should be very few and far between. The medical exemptions around that, shouldn't be, six players on a team have it. It shouldn't happen.
Does anyone have anything else? No other business to come before the board?
Nope, that's it. Thank you. I appreciate the discussion today.
Cindy, again, welcome. Sorry, thanks for hanging in on a long, lengthy discussion.
That's
I need a meeting to adjourn. A motion to adjourn.
So
Moved by Terry, seconded by Kim. All those in favor, please say aye. Reminder, our next board meeting, February 10th. Stay safe, everyone.
thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.